All right, so it is 7 o'clock. I am gonna get the Jericho Affordable Housing Committee June 13 meeting started. We'll start just by reviewing the agenda. Public comment first. We'll approve April and May minutes. I imagine the bulk of our discussion tonight will be centered around our recommendations for the town plan. Then I'll introduce and if time discuss an application for Jericho to be a neighborhood infill design case study. I'd like to, if it's okay with folks, move tabling at the July 27th farmers market to the end of the agenda, if there's time. Does anyone have a problem with that?
Already at the end now, so it's not a huge change there.
And then we'll do liaison updates, other business and July's agenda and adjourn. All righty, so public comment. Wayne, we've got Bill Butler in the room with us.
Hey, Bill, how you doing?
I'm well.
Do you have any public comment you'd like to share?
I'm just interested in the subject of the zoning, especially Riverside.
Sure.
And, you know, the discussion of that. It's a lot to cover there. And I think I sent you the comments from Bill Gardner, the architect.
Yeah.
He made really astute.
Yeah,
observations.
it was Bill Gardner and one other.
Rick Hamlin.
Yes. Yep.
So Rick is Greg Tatro's engineer.
Okay.
And he knows the regs. So the three people who know the regs the most, I think, are, you know, Rick and Bill Gardner and Michael. Touching all three of those people who help understand what's going on.
Yeah. Okay, so 7:02.
But Bill will have a chance to comment when we're going through that portion of our
Yeah,
stuff.
happy to.
Yeah.
Okay.
7:02, Wayne, and we'll start with the agenda item 3, which is approve the April and May minutes. Let's take them one at a time. Do I have a motion to approve the April minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. That was Eric. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Richard. Any edits to the minutes? I have a couple, Wayne. I'm just trying to find them. I have too many things open per usual. I just wanted to make sure that under the public comment section, that it was clear that Ben and Ally were currently renting an ADU, and that the owner that they're renting from wants to subdivide and sell part of the property to them so that they can stay and build a farm.
Owner.
And
That a change to the minute?
go ahead.
Is that a change to the minute?
Yeah. Did you have one too?
No, I'm just looking, I'm just catching up with you.
Oh, okay. And then under elect officers for 2023, there was a bit, maybe it's easier if I share my screen. There was a bit that I wasn't sure. Vice Chair Wayne Ellis. And then it says approved as second choice due to Richard Hankins' workload.
Yeah, is that, I figured that was.
That's
would
fine.
Show up on the video.
Do you remember who nominated and who seconded?
Richard,
No, you.
he?
Oh, I nominated Wayne.
You nominated Wayne?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
probably
Do you remember who seconded Wayne?
think Eric, I want to say Eric. but-
Yeah,
Rick was
probably I did. Yeah, I was.
Okay,
I was there. It's nice
Um,
to know I was noticed.
And that was a unanimous vote. Um. And I think that there were just two spelling things. One was, and I can send this to you too. Wayne.
Okay, that'd be good.
Under, at the very beginning, sorry, I didn't see this at first, in the very beginning, under public input. Chuck, 20 years ago, one could break off a smaller lot for family. It says of, but it should be off.
Okay,
And at the end of our, towards the end of the document. Eric G says we could use or ADU survey of last year and it should be our. So,
you could use what? Use our survey from last year? Okay,
and I'll send that to you too, so you don't have to hunt for those things.
okay, I appreciate it.
Any other changes? Then I'd like to, with those edits, approve the minutes of April. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any abstain? And any no? Okay, so that's unanimous, Wayne.
Okay,
And then the minutes from May, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll motion.
Thanks, Wayne. And anyone second, please?
No seconds.
Eric, thank you. All right, edits. Good. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any no? And any abstain?
I'll abstain.
Stacy is abstaining from May. Wayne.
Okay. Drake. All ayes, but one abstain.
All righty. 7:08, and we will start the discussion of our recommendations for the town plan. And Chuck and Frederica, you led this project, so take it away.
I'll start, and at some point, maybe we can switch. So, the purpose here, was not to set out zoning recommendations, because that comes after the town plan. But we wanted to have some input in how, what goes into the town plan in terms of principles and parameters that would then allow us to, further down the line, make more specific zoning recommendations. So that's what this is about. This is supposed to be somewhat specific to zoning. It also includes some recommendations that kind of are related to zoning. And it kind of also relates pretty closely to the resolution that was just advanced and is now on the website, and really goes through some of the rationale very nicely. So we, I don't know if any of you have had a chance to look at these, but what we're proposing are just a few principles that should somehow be reflected in the town plan, in the various sections of the town plan. And we heard some of that at the planning commission meeting last week of what that could look like. And those proposals, our proposals are, first of all, to consider the natural resources. We met with the head of the Conservation Commission and Committee. Is it committee or commission?
It's a commission.
Commission. And kind of heard about the resource mapping that's taking place, and that will identify areas that need to be considered when any new housing is developed. And so one of the things we think should be included is to prioritize finishing that mapping, to identify areas that are then appropriate for new housing. And yes, you, sounds like you're about to say.
Frederica, maybe I'm jumping in on you, Chuck, I saw, but I believe we have a conservation commission that completed a conservation mapping of areas in the town that were too steep, too wet, good soils and all of that which were unsuitable for development, and where they already were that was development. So how is this different than that
Yeah,
conservation
yeah.
overlay?
He feels they're not good enough.
Yeah, what we've heard is that they're not really finished yet, that there's more work that should go into it.
What he wanted to do is ground truth them. In other words, have people walk the areas to make sure that where they think is a vernal pool or too steep land is actually what's on the, from the maps of the property, as opposed to, something that hasn't been ground truth. And then I think in September, they were going to present those results maybe to the select board, and then there would be public comment later on. Or maybe the public comment was first, and the select board was like in the late third quarter.
And I think the basic point here is that we want to move away from 10-acre zoning as a way to protect natural resources. And basically 10-acre estate living is not a way to protect natural resources, but to get down to the science of it and find out what really needs to be protected. Because a lot of our, later recommendations call for clusters of housing in more places, and we want to be sure that they're going in places that are properly located for clusters. We want to move away from zoning as a way to protect natural resources, but to go straight to the issue and protect specific natural resources based on, the good work. And Tom was pretty clear that this is an outstanding issue for him and for the Conservation Commission. So we want to make sure in the town plan, there are sort of the resources and the commitment to get this done as a prerequisite for zoning that's going to come later.
And this will be done in September?
That's what he implied, but somehow he needs people to walk property. I think tomorrow night we have a meeting, so I'll ask him again if he needs anyone to walk properties or stuff to look at, or look at maps with them to help. But go ahead.
I think that Sabina, I feel like Sabina just spoke about this at the most recent select board meeting. And now I can't remember exactly what the topic was. About asking the select board to approve moving forward with this process or finalizing this process or something along those lines. I can't remember off the top of my head.
So they need a select board charter to do the ground truthing that they want to do. Is that, and that's what they're waiting for?
We don't understand. I guess we can't answer these detailed questions. It's just,
I'm just wondering, basically, if we have something that's going to be done in September, do we really need to say to the planning commission, hey, we should include this in there?
Yeah, the problem is that the draft of the town plan is going to be done way before that. And
Yes.
the
Yeah.
town plan itself will be at a pretty advanced stage before that. So if there is a clear plan to finish this by September and there are means for it, then the planning commission can clearly choose not to include that in their town plan. So the issue is taken care of, yes, then we don't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a lot of work, by a lot of people to do this.
So at the select board meeting, they reviewed and considered and ended up approving the natural resources overlay contract. That I assume is necessary to do this work.
Cool, if they approve the contract, that sounds like they're further along than we heard. So maybe that was more recent than we talked.
but we met with them a while ago.
Yeah, it was about a month ago, more than,
Yeah.
well, no.
But either way, I think that that is that is a thing that is happening, and in terms of what we're proposing, we're saying we want zoning and decisions about housing to be informed by that work and not necessarily, I don't want to put words in your mouth, just precedent or, because we've been doing it this way forever, but to really, when we're trying to decide where housing should go, it should be informed by natural resources in addition to some of the other things
Yeah.
that you're going to lay out.
Yeah. So that section could be revised to kind of better express that. It basically says it in the final sentence of that section, but the beginning may be obsolete if they've already gone ahead and finalized the contract.
I wonder if, and again, I haven't been party to the Conservation Committee activities and what you've done. But as the Affordable Housing Commission, perhaps the appropriate language for what we're saying is that we want to use that to identify where high density affordable housing is most appropriate in the town.
All housing.
We're the Affordable Housing Committee. We're not the All Housing Committee. We're the Affordable Housing Committee. Let's focus on affordable housing and where it should be.
Yeah, so where affordable housing, affordable as the basically definition, the dictionary definition of affordable that you can Google. That's not necessarily this synonymous with dense, it just goes into like an income bracket, right?
Yeah.
So,
We interject.
But I think, well, let's have,
Yes.
I'll turn it over to you for sure. I do think that I don't want to get derailed by this conversation, but I do think that we are, as we very clearly articulated in the housing targets resolution and our advocacy work around that, we are interested in not just affordable as defined by low income, but in increasing housing diversity and housing choice in Jericho. And that is more than just affordable. And so I do think that I do think it's completely appropriate for us to be talking about housing density, modest housing, middle income housing, in addition to affordable.
yeah, and that goes like what you're saying right now goes back to the kind of confusion around the term affordable, right? Yeah. So if you Google affordable, and if you look at the state definition of affordable, and even if you look at what we've found out in the housing needs assessment and where affordable is defined, it's median income, within 20% of median income. And when we can't equate affordable necessarily with low income, and the housing resolution makes that nice and clear, like the brackets that it involves. But I think our committee is called the Affordable Housing Committee, meaning it's not just dealing with low income housing. It's dealing with housing that's affordable to median incomes and below. I think it's even median incomes plus minus 20%. And
So that's 70% of all people.
So that's, I think that that we can specify that in that paragraph. I think that you make a good point, but I don't think that the density necessarily has anything, in principle to do with that. But we can, that's it, at least in this paragraph. We get to that a little bit later when we're talking about infill and about actual, how to increase density.
Yes, to all of those things. My caveat is that saying more housing is, I agree, it's the right thing to say. But we should be careful when we say more housing to say what kind affordable and whether or not we want to equate that with sprawl. There's a lot of Jericho that can be built upon. And it is, as we know, a lot easier to go off on something on Skunk Hollow or off of Barber Farm or Packard Road or any of those places and throw up 20 single family homes. It's a lot less costly than to try and tear down something here in the village center and put up 20 homes. One creates sprawl, which again, we're Affordable Housing Committee, we're not the anti-sprawl committee, but one creates sprawl. One creates more
How do you
concentrated homes.
sprawl?
My definition may not be yours.
Yeah, because
But if
when you're
we
talking about
want to have widely dispersed housing, then we're creating a sprawl.
Right.
And we
yeah,
are
so
taking
when
over
this
more
first
of the
is-
natural
It's
resources.
like a single family house. And then you walk a while and you get another single family house. That to me is sprawl, right?
Depends how close together they are and how far apart, but yeah, that would.
Half
Yeah.
acre lots, 1 acre lots.
So,
3 acre
yeah,
lots.
so, and I think that if you look at that, you know, you see that elsewhere, kind of in the state. You know, proposed state rules and stuff, that you want to avoid these. To encourage sprawl in the sense of that you have like. You know, houses that are far away from each other and just kind of sit in the landscape, so you don't have any landscape that's really just landscape. You have landscape where there's a house here and a house here and a house here. But, and it's true that you don't want to put a 20-unit development just anywhere. You want to have it in an area that makes sense, for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can, and we kind of get to that, I don't think you can just bank on accomplishing all affordable housing in the village centers and in the village district. Just because those areas are in private hands. And
As is most of the town.
and yes, and the turnover is not, you know, rapid enough that
Yeah.
you know, you can expect to meet our housing targets just with development in the village centers.
So I think before we move on to this, you're starting to get into arguments for the rest of the document, which is good. It means the flow is good. I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think you got the feedback of really clarifying why the natural resources overlay will
Yeah.
be helpful in strategic planning for future development and identifying locations where dense development needs to be, with the kind of understanding that it's not like, let's highlight all of the areas that are great for development and say, here, free for all. The idea of using it is to use it as a strategic tool that guides these decisions in a broader context of Jericho.
Yeah, I
Is
think
that-
it really is. I mean, you're right. It's the way we said it is that the mapping should be finished, but that doesn't seem. I think it's more just the last sentence of that section, which says natural resource mapping will inform land use and help identify areas appropriate for new housing. And the ask for the planning for the town plan would be to kind of refer to the intersection between both natural resource planning and housing.
And to stop using 10 acre zoning as a way to protect natural resources.
That's not going to be in our specific ask, but that may be a.
So before we move on, did you have some natural resources?
Yeah,
Can we
I
get
think,
info there?
I think the resistance that people feel about housing is, you want to be a rural community, and that isn't just a surface thought, it's protecting the environment. And knowing that you are doing this very conscientious survey of the resources, and that's part of this plan. I think from a promotional point of view, I would tie them together so tightly when you promote it to the public. Because I have those concerns, and when I hear what you say, I feel better about it. I feel like, okay, what I care about will be protected because I care about the natural resources.
Wayne, that's Bill Butler talking. I'm not sure if you can
I
tell.
got it. Yep, no,
I just from a
got it.
marketing point of view, I love the idea of tying it together
Yeah.
very explicitly. That's it.
Go ahead, Wayne.
I just want to say something. I think we can't be obsessed about 10-acre zoning. Because again, I've lived here since 1977. And if you sell a 200-acre farm and break it into 10-acre lots, each one might have 1 or 2 acres you build on. There's a lot of wet and land that's not good for development. Like if you look at the Governor Peck, I mean, I live just up from that PUD and we're on a sand hill. They're on sand, but there are wetlands distributed through those lots they're trying to carve into there. So it's like if somebody had originally, like they said, put a couple 10-acre lots in there, it would be easy. And now you've got the natural resources people, they're talking about, could you just map this before you do the development? And I think that's the one thing that the 10-acre lot does is if you can buy it, then it solves a lot of these problems about trying to map out these issues. And that goes back to the 70s when the farmers were selling their farms to move and retire to Florida. They didn't want that problem. So what they did was they tried to carve up the land so that huge wet area over there was in a corner and there would be 2 or 3 acres that you could actually put a house on. Now, if you go to places like Essex Junction, yeah, there's 10-acre plots that you could put 20 houses on easily, but we don't have that topography here in Jericho. So I think we have to be careful with blanket discussions about you can't have this big of a lot, because it could be what's helping you build a house or a duplex or something, because the rest of the land is not developable.
I totally agree, and I think that's my point. Of course, you can have a 10-acre lot, and of course, I mean, nobody's prohibiting 10-acre lots. The question is, what really limits development? Is it zoning that tells you, we're divvying up the land in 3-acre or 10-acre increments, which, by the way, is pretty unique for Jericho? Or is it the limitations of the land, the limitations of moisture and the limitations of natural resources? And isn't that what's supposed to be deciding to where you can and cannot build? I mean, those things don't have to be prefaced by a zoning, a very large zone.
Well,
I don't think that we necessarily want to divvy up all of Jericho and build little, build on little tiny 1/4-acre lots everywhere in Jericho. That's not what we're saying. It's just that, you're not outlawing 10-acre zones by doing away with 10-acre zones in some areas where we may decide that it makes sense to have smaller lots. You're still going to be limited by the natural resources. You're still going to be limited by the moisture and the wastewater and the water. Those limitations don't go away by changing the zoning.
See, the thing we have nowadays is we have those ground scan radars that they've done of the whole state. And, I can look on the map and there's Chuck's house with a nice area behind it. And 200 feet down the street from him, there's a house on a tiny little island of land, and it's wetland behind him. So we now have that. So it's, in a sense, it's not 10 acres versus what, but now we can actually look at the soil maps and say, okay, yes, it's a big piece of land, but there's only a corner of it that could hold a septic system.
Right.
And
And this reminds me of what David White was saying. I don't know if you were at the last planning commission meeting. What he was saying and what he keeps saying, and I kind of stuck with me, is, we shouldn't let zoning dictate what we do. We should dictate what we want the zoning to do. And, the zoning shouldn't start this. The zoning should follow what we want. And that's exactly what you're saying. We should start with what the land looks like.
yes, exactly.
Right?
That's it. We start with the science, yeah. And we have that now that we didn't have before.
I think we get lost in the 10-acre zoning and other zoning sites is that those were not put in necessarily say this can is only suitable for 10 acres. Those regs go back to 1960s, late 60s, early 70s, when Jericho is looking around at Essex, at Williston, at South Burlington, and seeing all these farms carved up into 1-acre, 2-acre lots. And Jericho was saying, wait a minute, we're rural. We want to preserve our viewscape. We want to preserve our farmlands. We want to make Jericho look this way. These are lands that we don't want developed. Develop here, grow here, but we don't want to look like Williston, Essex, South Burlington, which were all going crazy at that time. So the 10-acre zoning was not necessarily to preserve just the wetlands or something, but it's to make sure that houses were spread out far enough apart, and to make sure that the rural character at a certain level was preserved. Yeah, we may say now it's no longer necessary to do that. We have other tools, but it was not just, hey, willy-nilly, 10-acre there, nothing here. It was, this is where we want growth. that's our rural area, let's keep it that way, in the hopes that it would not be turned into houses everywhere.
Well, there's also a very explicit goal of increasing property values. And that was front and center at the time.
Yeah, and again, it's pretty unique because, you know, if you look at Shelburne, if you look at Richmond, if you look at any other place around us,
If you look at Westford, they've got it. If you look out at Cambridge, if you look at other,
Cambridge has no zoning regs that I could find. Underhill has a very thin part that's 10 acres zoned right around the Mount Mansfield area.
Fletcher had them years ago. I don't know if they still do, they had big
So
zones.
I just looked at the things that are kind of around us. And I haven't yet found another place that has 10 acre zones. But I'm happy to be enlightened there. I've looked and looked, I went as far as, you know, Charlotte and Shelburne and like everything that's kind of, we're in Chittenden County, so I kind of
Yeah.
primarily looked there.
10 acres was also zoned at that level because Act 250, when it came in, exempted lot sizes of 10 acres or more from Act 250 review. So if you've got a 200-acre lot and you want to subdivide it, and you don't want to have to go through Act 250 with all the requirements, 10 acres, that's how you got Skunk Hollow.
Yeah, but how does that lead to a zoning prescription?
Because the developer says, I want 10 acres. And the developer says, Planning Commission, let's make this 10 acres so I don't have to go through.
Yeah, but you don't have
Act
to
250.
zone it 10 acres. You can zone it for, I mean, that's, you know, anyway, I think we're getting caught
We're
up.
getting lost in the weeds. on
Yes,
that,
we're
yeah.
getting lost in the weeds. But so let's, you know, if it's okay, let's just start with the beginning with, I think, something that we can all agree on, which is that we all agree with the basic philosophy that, you know, we have town centers here, we have village centers, and I think, you know, most folks in Jericho agree that it would be nice to have, you know, a lot of development there if we could have it, or much of the development that we're aiming for.
My suggestion would be, Frederica, if you could go through the basic, get the basic principles and just get all the way through.
Yeah,
And then we
so,
can go
okay.
back.
So infill, facilitating infill, which may require actually reducing lot sizes, doing away with road frontage requirements if you're gonna have infill. Maybe expanding the village center and the village zones to include anything that's walkable. Again, that's something that David White showed. If you take circles around the village center, the center of the village center that are walkable, include that in kind of the zone that's actually zoned for development. And right now that's not really the case. So those are the main thoughts about the village center and the village district. Kind of focusing on making possible different kind of zoning in those areas. And then the next point was multifamily units. We already have, like the last town plan already increased or made it possible to build duplexes everywhere. We should probably, you know, think about allowing basically 3 and up units everywhere that we allow duplexes. That's going to be limited in the long run by, you know, of course, things like sewer and water, but it doesn't have to be limited by zoning. So allowing multifamily housing pretty much everywhere that we allow single family housing would be another thing that's something that we thought would be useful, but that may be something that we want to talk about here as a.
It's also in the state statutes.
State statutes encourage that. And then finally, another one was looking at the areas that border our neighboring towns and seeing whether we should have the same kinds of zoning in those border areas that they have right across the town line to kind of encourage, you know, harmonizing basically zoning. And that would apply to like the Richmond Jericho border, that would apply to the Fulton Jericho border. That might apply down at the bottom of, you know, Barber Farm or Skunk Hollow where you get to Route 117. So those were basically the core elements that we thought we would have put out there and see if you guys
I
agree.
think another was our skepticism about infill.
Well, I think I already mentioned that, I believe that that our belief after kind of, and we talked about this a lot after going through like what's actually happening on the ground in Jericho Center and what's actually happening in Jericho Corners. Is that and what we're seeing with the pace of development is that the pace of development is very low. And the reason is, seems to be that the people that live here aren't really super interested in, building another unit in their backyard. Unless they have a family need for that, unless they have like a kid that wants to come home and they want to build a house out back or an ADU. But otherwise, it's just not been much movement and it doesn't, I don't know that we can meet our housing targets just with densification or infill in the village centers. Which is, so that's where those other ideas came from of harmonizing border areas, changing zoning, expanding the zone around the village centers and, making multifamily housing possible everywhere. We actually never spoke about 10-acre zoning or 3-acre zoning. We didn't really bring that up except in the context of wanting to allow multifamily housing. So that was kind of a side discussion, this whole 10-acre zoning thing. But we didn't put that in there. I mean, it's not something that we would, again, that's more specific. It's not even something we would want the town plan to reflect at this point. The town plan is more about more general principles. So.
I think also, that it's really important that the town plan includes what the town government needs to look like in order to achieve whatever objectives are in the town plan, but we're talking about housing, like to once again have lofty goals, but not adjust the town government and develop the capacity to implement those goals is just another game of Lucy's football. We also honed in on the on Riverside and the form-based code and just when you talk to the last remaining select board member who voted for it, says the purpose was to increase housing and to make it easier to build housing, and we all know that didn't happen. There's been no new housing in 8 years. I've been asking around who supports this. We can't find anybody who supports it.
Chris Flynn seems to come back and say that he thinks it's valuable.
He thinks it needs a lot of changes, and he called it like a cut and paste job from a consultant, was when we met with him. But yeah,
Chris
he feels like it's not
like
as,
you should
not
keep
as
it, but
it's not an obstacle, and we'll hear, we'll kind of hear from these guys, but we're recommending that either it be changed or abolished by the end of the year.
What's this again now?
The form-based code and Riverside, it's we can't find anybody who really supports it. And
I wonder if we're conflating the current form-based code as it is presented with the intention. The form-based code is intended, and I don't believe its current iteration is correct, but its intention was if you follow the form-based code for your building design and structure, you get automatic approval to build it. So it streamlines your process, but you have to adhere to the form-based code. The form-based code as it is designed may not be very good, but its intended use to reduce the regulatory requirements to get a permit should be something we support.
right,
Right. And that's what Chris Flynn said. He said it makes it more straightforward to developers to know what they need to do.
Yeah.
When you look at it, it doesn't come across like that because it seems very, very, very highly complex. But I guess, and our impression is that it hasn't really, nothing has really happened there. Now, is that because of the complexity of form-based coding, or is it just because Chris Flynn says it's because it's not all really been sold yet?
It's not all in one.
So
What's
the
the
question is,
problem?
what is, so the question is, what is going on with that zone? What is going on with form-based coding? Is it too complex? And when we looked at it, it looks to us like it seemed overly restrictive and.
so if it needs to be
It
reformed,
takes
it should,
out-
it needs to be reformed, it should be reformed quickly, or it should be abolished.
But what it does is it takes out the subjective variation from the DRB to say, we don't like the way that looks. Because if it looks like the form-based code, it is approved. So in the sense of streamlining the approval process, it works for that. In the sense of it's a nice design, it's something people want to build, it makes sense. No, it doesn't. From what I've heard
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
the roof pitch angles are such that a 3-story building would need a 5-story roof,
Right.
and that's just dumb.
Also, actually, the process, they have actually a figure of what you have to do in order to get something approved.
Mhm.
And it still goes through, you know. They
It's
call it
less than
something
if you do
else
it
that
the
we
other
don't
way.
even have, but they mean like the development review board, and still goes through the planning commission.
But it has less hoops to go through. I agree, it's not a good code, it's not a good form-based code.
But that's the intent.
But the
That's
intention
intent,
is something that
Yeah.
works well.
Yeah,
Where has it worked well?
South Burlington. That whole town center is all form-based code.
And the developers will say it worked well for them, and
They're developing it.
that's what Chris Flynn claims. He claims that it works well for developers,
Basically, what?
that it works well for developers. Or it could work well for developers.
so it needs to be reformed, so it does work well.
So that's
Or it
as
needs
far
to be
as we got
abolished.
with that. Maybe we need to talk to some developers and see what they actually feel about that particular.
And I think that again, like those, the nice thing about the way that you proposed it here is that it creates a sense of urgency and to actually look into it and make some decisions. And then,
Yeah,
Right.
because that's one of the areas where we actually could, in a village center, have some development.
And
if
so-
that is an impediment, and I'm not sure how much of it is the
I mean,
impediment.
right now, it's an impediment to meeting 1 year of our goal.
and so the way that you've written it highlights the fact that the code that we currently have is problematic and allows the grace for either the work to amend it, which is part of the zoning and regulations amendments and not part of town plan, or the decision that, form-based code as a concept doesn't work for Jericho and for Riverside, and it should be abolished. Either of those options can play out here, but what you've established is that
Something should.
something
play.
needs to happen
Yeah.
because what we currently have is hindering development.
Or there, at least there is no development, maybe that this is what's.
But
happening.
can I ask
Or
a
at the
question?
very least, it's the regulations in the form, I see you, Wayne, the regulations in the form-based code are not feasible and overly, I don't know what the word is. Go ahead, Wayne.
I'm scribbling away madly here. So I've heard multiple people saying multiple things. What I've heard that the form-based code is keeping people from developing in the town centers. Then I've heard it may be keeping people, and then I've heard it's supposed to help streamline development. So I guess my question is, do we know, is there somebody who's actually said, if you didn't have that, I would have built something? I mean, it sounds like we're going in circles here. I'm just
I
wondering
think
what,
we have two people in the room who might say just that. But the distinction is definitely between the intention of a form-based code as a tool in planning.
Yeah.
And the form-based code in Riverside. And
So
so
there's-
that's where
It
those
added
are,
23
two
new
separate-
regulations on the placement of a window.
wait a minute, that's in the code?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's all kinds
Yeah.
of stuff like that. There's.
What percentage
like
can be a glass, what percentage it cannot be.
From West Virginia.
What kind of
And
trees can
yes.
be planted where,
so one of
Oh,
them,
like the
okay.
cheap species of tree?
Yeah.
they made it illegal to make birdhouses for sale using hand tools in half of Riverside.
What? When was that
Yes.
written?
not the houses.
Exactly, that.
Well, that's okay, because my birdhouses I make with a little hand saw, circular saw, and it's electric, so I guess I'm okay.
But if you did them there, you couldn't sell them.
You can
So-
make it,
Okay.
you just can't sell them, that's all.
So
People
just
should be
to,
creative, encouraged to be creative. I mean, that's. My feeling is when we get to Riverside, there should be a sign that says, it's okay to make stuff here. We make stuff. Yeah, you know, anyway.
So-
You didn't have.
So Bill, let me just ask you a quick question then. So you're trying to build a structure there. And so if I heard this right, you're saying that based on the current form-based code, you'd have to build a peak of your building that would be 5 stories above the ground to meet the code. Did I get that right?
We're designing a building in the hope that this zoning, these requirements are going to be left by the wayside. You know, I think the people of Jericho, they participated in this problem solving process, and they were shown something that everyone loved. And then the reality is that the zoning doesn't allow for hardly any of it. And so we have a building, Wisdom House, for instance, that it's designed, it's ready to go. And, but, well, not quite exactly, but it's pretty close. We have a parking garage underneath, and then we have nice decks on top, flat roof. Ooh, you know, and I just feel like I want to make a building where people live and feel happy and are part of a community, not restricted by this pseudo concept that's created by people who don't even live here. And people who do live here wouldn't like it either. I would like it if you let us show you the building and say, okay, we'll design the zone around that. Everyone wants what we're trying to make. Why is this a problem? And I'd say bag it and say, come up with a design that we're all gonna love. We have wonderful architects. And the building that we've designed, I think is fantastic. You can live it in the winter and not feel depressed. It's got lots of light, and you walk around like walking spaces and gardens. I don't want to constrain that idea by some concept that is really a bill of goods. And one thing though, that I think is really important. Michael and I have a design, Wisdom House is a large building, will hold 32 people, units, sorry. And we're only going to, if we even have to market it, we're gonna market it locally. My feeling is a lot of our customers will be people who are downsizing. And there will be a lot of housing available if we provide respectable housing for seniors. They'll leave their homes. But if what I see around, I'm not leaving my house. You know, I'm gonna stay there. I spoke to the governor about it the other day. It was like head snap. Take care of the elderly, that will take care of it. Not all the housing problems, but a big part of it. And that will, you know, people with kids will move into my 3-bedroom home, you know, and then suddenly the schools are full. And suddenly we can pay more teachers, and there's a lot of things that can be solved by the interconnectedness of these ideas. But you know, we're at it kind of a roadblock, I think. You know, we're not willing to just pour money into this. We watched Greg Tate. He had money. Yeah, we're just like trying to make this.
So where are your roadblocks right now?
Michael's the zoning. This is Michael Owen.
I mean, you are at a certain stage. Why are you not proceeding right now?
Well, it's partly because Greg is tied up in making his phase 1 of this, which has been forced on him by the way the zoning works. He's been forced to conform to that to make any moves at all. By the way, my name is Michael Owen. I'm part of the Wisdom House review, and we are trying to do this. We've been working with Greg. He has been.
And Greg is your developer? or-
Greg Tatro is the owner.
Okay,
We have a signed agreement with Greg to purchase
right.
5 or
right.
6
You told me
acres
that.
somewhere
Right, we're
in
working on
there.
that. But I think that the most informative piece of this is he wanted to begin to monetize some of this. He bought it, he's been carrying it, he's been doing a lot of design work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He wanted to monetize a frontage building to begin taking out some return from is very substantial investment. He is and has been totally committed to everything that Jericho, the vision that Jericho created when it put together this district. I was actually a transportation planning consultant. I was working on this in 2005. So Jericho has been working on putting together a vision here very assiduously and came up with really a very nice vision. It's the translation of that into the particulars of the zoning where the problems are. So I'll give you just a couple of quick examples. One, Greg Tatro was trying to put this building on the frontage. He had it well designed by Bill Gardner, a Jericho resident who was his architect at the time. The building was an excellent building. He was turned down twice by the DRB and finally had to abandon that entire project. He invested tons of money in trying to make that work with the architecture, the engineering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This should not be happening with form-based code and that sort of thing. And it's supposed to make things easier and work better. The other example I'd like to give is that.
Can you say what that building was going to be for?
Yes, it was supposed to be, it started out being a mixed-use building. It was going to be both housing and commercial on the first floor. It was going to be 2 floors. But they had to abandon the second floor because I don't know what that was. They ran into problems before they could even do that. So they got down to commercial only, but even that was not able to be realized.
This was before or after form-based code?
This was after form-based code. This was under form-based code that he ran into problems. I can go into greater detail about some of them, but I mean, it gets down to the point of not being able to put the gas meter it has to be in the back of the building, even if the gas, there's a tiny little gas meter or something like that. And so you have to run all this extra. I mean, there's all sorts of things that go on with it.
There's a lot of parking and flow issues.
So the parking and so on, the quote unquote thoroughfare design was the thing that really ran into problems. But however, the other example I'd like to give is when I was trying to understand, because I did zoning professionally for many years in Massachusetts. I wrote zoning for about a dozen Massachusetts communities where you have to adopt it by a 2/3 vote of town meeting. So we were familiar with it. It's not even the kind of thing that we do here. But basically, I was trying to understand what the basis of putting this zoning in place was. And so there was never anything that was written up about that. That's not that unusual. But I was told that there were 4 communities on which the zoning was based. They've gone to these 4 Vermont communities, to try to figure out how Vermont villages work. And those 4 communities, let's see, were Richmond, Waterbury, Stowe, and Bristol. Those 4. So I took a look at those and I took a look at the zoning. None of those communities could be built under the current form-based code, not one. Stowe comes a little bit closer, but so none of them could actually be realized from this. So you can see the shortcomings that we're actually dealing with here. Now, I think my own sense is I'd like to we could make this project work somewhat under the existing form-based code. Not well, it's going to mean a lot of compromises in what we're able to do. It's going to raise costs and we're going to have a less than optimal situation, but something could happen. Whether or not we'll be able to pull it off, I don't know. However, given the opportunity, when Bill Gardner and Rick Hamlin from Hamlin Associates were working on this project, they created, and I owe this to Chuck, I apologize for what my absence, I thought we had a little bit more time here, so you'll get it. But Hamlin wrote up a single page of very dense recommendations about things that ought to be done.
You have that.
Yeah, we did pass this around, and Bill Gardner wrote up 4 pages of very dense recommendations of all the things that needed to be done to make this code begin to work. There is a fair amount that does need to be done. I would even add a couple myself, but we have this information available. So, and my own sense is that if we were to do some really good modifications on this relatively quickly, that would create a pretty optimal situation for us and so on, because it's based on that vision. However, failing that, if I had to choose between the existing code and reverting to your existing village center zoning, don't forget, village center zoning with a PUD can build 10 units to the acre. So we're already talking not 10 acres, 10 units per acre. The point is 0.1 acres, the minimum lot size in your PUD under village center zoning. You can do an enormous amount with that. We could work with that. So if I were to choose between the existing and reverting to village center zoning, reverting to your conventional village center zoning would work better for us than the zoning that's there, but it's worth working with it, I believe, and making it
But
work.
what if it, but what about timing? If it takes.
Timing, yeah, we need to begin moving on that. We definitely need to be moving on that. Greg has working on getting something going. He was basically, I don't want to say forced, but kind of to make things work. He needed to come up with this phase one kind of project, which is kind of a little piece of a design done by the original consultants from Tennessee, who have great credentials in terms of all of this form-based code stuff. And I actually helped Paul Dreyer put together the first form-based code in Vermont, in Newport. I did.
He's the Tennessee guy.
No, Paul Dreyer. No, that's Brian Wright, the Tennessee guy. Paul Dreyer was the town planner for Newport, city planner for Newport City. And he was putting together the first form-based code in Vermont, and I helped him work up some of the thoroughfare work associated with that. So I have had considerable familiarity with it over the years. I think it can be a great tool. When I first heard it was there, I said, wow, this is cool. But when I started seeing what we were actually going to be dealing with, I shared Chuck and others' concerns associated with it. So, rather than just go on at great length, I'll certainly answer any questions.
So I think that at the end of the day, what you're saying, what you both have heard in your research, I think what folks at the Planning Commission, Eric, probably heard, is consistent with what's written here, that the form-based code either needs to be amended or abolished, but keeping it as is a no-go. And yeah, that especially because of our housing targets, because of Pedro being
projects.
ready to move, who is the primary landowner there, that it needs to happen urgently. So it feels appropriate, and I think it's a good thing to include in this proposal. So I want to bring us back to, because it's almost 8 o'clock, I want to bring us back to this proposal. I think the good news, and we said this last month too, is that all of the expanding, looking at village and village center district zoning and expanding that, identifying areas where we can increase housing, looking at making multi-unit housing easier and available in all places or many places, and creating a scenario or an environment in which infill is possible and facilitated, are all things that are part of what David White has been proposing for the town plan update. So everything that, and based on the last planning commission meeting, that even includes talking about the capacity of town government and expanding it, whether or not it needs to be expanded. So what you have proposed, I think, will fit nicely into the bones that David already has. And so this is a nice opportunity for us to really fine tune and hone in on some of the things that we feel are most important messaging wise and priority wise in how those get translated into the town plan. And then, as you said, Frederica, to set the stage for the recommendations that that you guys, and then on behalf of Affordable Housing Committee, will be working to make in the next season. So what can we do to get this document where it needs to be, for you all to have your questions, you, Frederica and Chuck, to have your questions answered, and everyone else on the committee to feel comfortable bringing this to David White?
I'd like to see it shortened to perhaps 5 or 6 total paragraphs instead of however many pages it is right now. There's a lot of if, because, therefore, we should, but just we should. Let's cut to the chase and tell them what we think we want them to do.
I'm shortening.
And our plan is to put together slides for presentation to the planning commission and the select board.
All right,
So that will be concise.
if we shorten it, if we make it much shorter, and we can always leave the extended version around somewhere, but if we make it shorter. Will you guys have time to take a look at it and see if you find it
Yeah.
okay to move ahead? And if not, make edits, because you know, it's kind of a burden to do that.
But just in reading through it, I think probably 70% of it is stuff we already know, stuff we know in the towns, just get to the point. You know, when we did the one for the recommendation to the select board on affordable housing, that's what, 2 paragraphs long?
The resolution?
Yeah.
It's like 1.5 pages, but it's a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
This is a public document. It's meant to educate people who aren't on the planning commission, who aren't on the select board, who aren't on this committee. I really think that, you know, I think some of this detail is important. We're going to put together a set of slides for a presentation, for presentations for the planning commission and the select board. I think we can use those slides in terms of getting to the point, you know, for people. But I mean, it's tempting to speak in shorthand because for people who have been discussing these issues for, you know, a couple of years, some of it is familiar ground. And these represent, I think, the conclusions of a lot of different conversations in different places. So yeah, if you've been in this world, you know, along with us, then it does seem a little repetitive. But, you know, when I've given this to people to read who aren't on any of these committees, you know, the details necessary for them to understand, in my view, understand what we're talking about. This is a recommendation from us, you know, it's basically to the town. It's not notes for the planning commission. Funny, coming from the planning commission, you're going to take the plan down from 248 pages down to how many?
I think we're going down to about 60, and that's probably too many. You know, brevity. People don't have attention spans.
As long as it's well indexed and people can go to the places they are interested in, you know, I wouldn't take things out, I just make it possible to find what you.
My philosophy is every good document has 3 pieces. First one, what you asked us to do, what we did, and why you should do something, care about it. It's 3 sentences. The second one, about 10 pages. Here's how we found out what we did. Here's how we came to our recommendations for you. And that's about 5 pages. The next section, here's all the detail. You want to read it? Go nuts. But you don't have to.
Index.
Yeah, adapting that here, you know, I could easily see turning this into a page of what we should do.
Yeah.
And then kind of attach kind of a longer version for people that want to delve into it.
Let's see. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to find the document to look at it, and now I lost the. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Now I found it. Is there any way you could put this up or somehow?
Sure.
I hear you talk about the document, but I don't see it. And
It was sent on, what day did you send that, SJ? That was,
I sent it late, Saturday, maybe?
Sunday, I think. Yeah.
Was it Sunday? Was it even that late? Sorry, guys.
oh, so it's not in the documents that were in the meeting notice.
It is.
Oh,
It
is.
was.
it's in the
attached.
earlier one.
Okay, I'm just looking at, I know you go to some of these housing convenings and there's so much boilerplate in the you know, the foreground causes the background that they fill in causes the foreground to go underground, but I'm just scanning this and I think it's avoided that also, yeah.
We also don't know that SJ also rewrote it after
I
we
didn't rewrite it. I
sent it
reorganized
to
it.
put it in, reorganize it into bullets with bold highlighting and
Yeah. I think we can get that.
And I'm working with two scientists who are really good at doing lab reports.
We like
It's a
to have
tough life.
structure. We just like to have structure.
That's exactly
And
right.
SJ outstructured me.
I got a little obsessive and,
No, but it was good. Maybe I should start.
but you
feeling
don't have to
that.
take it all, but,
No,
and
I
I
like
do think that it is a good point.
If the
One
planning
of the
commission,
things-
planning commission member doesn't have time to read through these 5 pages, we got a bigger problem.
Yes.
Okay, but,
Well,
but,
I think we can find a compromise here. really,
um,
where
yeah,
we
but
have front and center what we really want to get across, and then we just reorganize it.
It's too easy for people to get lost in the weeds when you have a clear message to send. Give them
Well,
a clear message. Don't make them dig around for it.
So,
Go ahead,
so
Rick.
I would just point out that I was looking for boilerplate, now I see it. I think this is, scroll back down a bit, please. So there was something I saw about something for incentivizing wealth, there we go. Be banning multi-unit housing, company with large lots on its choice to prioritize, well, this is opinion, okay? I think what we want to do is talk about
Where is that? Where is that?
B.
3B.
3B,
That's my
yeah.
favorite sentence.
Yeah, I think to sit there and jump to conclusions, you
It
know,
is currently banned.
well,
Is it a choice to prioritize wealth or is it something else?
Yeah.
That's an opinion.
you don't know that. You don't, yeah, that's an opinion. I mean, if you can find some people that were on these committees 5, 10, 15 years ago and said, yeah, damn it, we did this to prioritize our wealth. And, you know, you've got a document from them, then you can say that, but this is,
That's what the minutes say. I've read the minutes. I've read the
Well-
minutes back to 1954. And one of the priorities was increasing property values by restricting housing. They were really clear. That's what they were doing.
well, you know what?
The result.
I think
May
we need
cause
to
it, but it's not.
come to something that the committee can
This
get behind.
54,
I've read the
Yeah,
minutes.
no,
back-
I think you got to stick
Select
to,
board minutes.
I think you've got, well, you know, the thing is then those people weren't as wealthy as people are nowadays. You know, when I came to Vermont, to Jericho in 77, there are a lot of people that were scratching by, working as technicians at IBM and stuff. And that house was going to be their retirement to move to Florida with. You know, so, you know, if you're in a position of wealth, it's kind of hard to, you know, point a finger at people that aren't in those positions. And so I think what we should do is be talking about what we can do to facilitate more and lower cost housing for the people that were at the position we were when we were in our late 20s trying to buy our first house and stuff. I don't think like, yeah, I don't want my name associated with anything that would talk like this to voters of Jericho.
So I think that what we can do is we can turn it positive. We can say what we want to do, you know, to, you know, promote development that is affordable for median income people. So I think I see here where you're coming from. You don't want to attack people. You want to, you don't want wording that attacks people.
Especially when it's so subjective. I mean, so I'm a scientist, I'm working with IBM research, and I just went through this thing on artificial intelligence. I'm working on a new kind of computer processor that works like a neural cortex. The biggest thing is how do you take your prejudices, keep them out of artificial intelligence? And so, you know, you might have prejudice that somebody must have said something in a meeting, but you know, this is a public document and we can't be, you know, I just go back to some of the things I've seen in, you know, the housing convening stuff where somebody comes and it's just like, everybody's bad except my friends, you know? And I think that, yeah, we got definitely, Frederico, we got to clean this up and we've got to make it factual. And I appreciate Chuck's frustration and all, and I really appreciate his thoughts, but I don't think we can put that in something that has our names on it.
Yeah,
It's
to
not mine.
take your point, Wayne, if we just get rid of the A, B on multi-unit housing, that is what we want. A and B is justification for the goal. Throw that in the appendix if you need to, but we're talking about number 3 as the important thing.
Yeah, that's what I mean by that's what you said by, we stick to what we should do, what we want to do. So-
I'm sorry.
You just want to kind of. I think that, I could argue with you that what we're writing here, and that's actually a sentence I wrote. Is correct and expresses the reality that we're making a choice when we ban multi-unit housing. We're making a choice to prioritize those folks that can afford to buy single-family homes in Jericho. So I kind of stand behind that, but I realize that it's kind of a provocative way to write it. And I realize that, that's not the point of this, is not to editorialize. So I hear you there. And I think we can, as you said, we could just focus on the things that we're proposing. And put the rationale in less, editorial terms, in the appendix.
We
or
could
something
say
on
that the effect is that only wealthy people can afford it.
Yeah, or you
There's a
could say
much
that
less prejudicial
less-
way you could say
You
it,
could say that it's more difficult for people to find affordable housing.
or you
when
could change it to something that people would much more agree with in Jericho, which is by banning multifamily housing, we are going to increase the number of independent households, and therefore there will be more houses in places where we don't want them.
Well, but the thing is, we're trying to make housing accessible to,
Exactly,
people,
exactly.
so-
But we're saying more housing, but don't put it everywhere. Put it in the right places. That leads you to multifamily housing. No multifamily housing means a lot of dispersed housing around the town. If you're gonna have
I
growth.
saw somewhere it was expressed, I think, in a resolution for a potential state bill. It was expressed as we should ban single unit zoning. But that again, that even for me sounded too negative,
Mhm.
because people are gonna say, so, but I hear you. I mean, that can be reformulated easily.
well, I would just say from that is that I lived in California. I spent 7 years in Purgatory in Silicon Valley up till about 5 years ago. And out there, the builders, everyone thinks that environmentalists control, it's builders. And they try to ban single unit housing because what they want is a 100 unit apartment building that's 4 or 5 stories tall. And they say, we have to build this to help people, but it's $3,000 a month for rent for a single bedroom. And then they'll say, well, we're as low as $2,200 for rent. You can't find that apartment. It doesn't exist. Theoretically, it could, but it's not for sale. Maybe if you're a friend of the manager of the building, you might get it. But, when you ban single unit housing, that sends up a big red flag after seeing what happened in California, living there for 10 years. It's a complete disaster. Traffic is out of control, facilities, resources are out of control. And it's all because the real estate people don't want to build single houses. They want huge apartment complexes, and they still charge an arm and a leg for them. So I think instead, if you say we would encourage multi-unit housing to help people in the middle income, median income range access their first home. That's the kind of thing that I think people will respond to.
Yeah. What you said at the end there is kind of the intent. So, again, as you said, phrasing it positively rather than negatively, I think will get us to where we can have a consensus.
We also really, I think we just have to speak the truth that there's been a really fundamental injustice that has been perpetrated in Jericho and in 100,000 other towns and cities. What has happened is wrong. And, I think we have to call it out. I'm fine if you want to water this down, I understand I'm in the minority, but there's a fundamental injustice here, and we need to say it out loud.
Well,
If you
but
have Duplex on a 10-acre lot, does that mean you need 20 acres? Or
No, for a duplex, you need 10. If you were to put more in, you would need more. More than. a
But
duplex.
basically, you're
Up to a duplex, you don't,
cutting the zone in half.
yes, up to a duplex.
No, it's
you-
a duplex, so you would, the house might be a duplex, whether the land is owned in condominium or separate is not clear.
But if it's in a 10-acre zone, which normally would have, previously would have allowed only one home. Now you add a duplex. So
Yes.
So you're doubling the density, you're cutting
Right.
the zoning.
Well, you're doubling the density.
It's still only one building.
But on that lot,
And that only, and that only.
on that lot, you can currently build a single-family home up to 60,000 square feet.
No, I can't.
3 times the
Stand
size
up.
of Patrick Gym, and it's illegal to build a triplex with 600 square foot apartments.
I'm sympathetic, but I just worry about a conservation zone that was 10 acres along the river.
It's
And-
not gonna, the acreage isn't gonna change. The acreage of the zone is not gonna,
But
that's,
you're essentially cutting the zone in half.
it's
by having
already,
to-
it's already in there. That's already in the existing zoning regulations. There's no.
We need to
change.
protect that waterfront with these maps,
That's,
not with big zones.
if you look at the zoning regulations, it already says that the, up to a duplex. The zoning is the same for a building that's a duplex as it is for a single family home.
And this is about a little-
That is, I don't know how far back that goes.
The
but
last
it's in
year and a
there.
half,
It's in there.
I call that relative. I mean, yes,
it is new.
And thank you for letting me ask.
I mean, we have the lowest percentage of kids eligible for free and reduced lunch at Jericho Elementary School, the lowest percentage in the state of Vermont. And we still send transportation out every morning to motels in Barry and Colchester to pick up kids that don't have homes and bring them to school.
wait a minute, we send buses to Barry and Montpelier to bring kids to our school?
And Barry to pick up kids who are living in motels, the ones that are gonna get kicked out.
Oh, wait a
We
minute,
pick 'em up.
we bring them to Chittenden to Mount Mansfield?
So they can stay in their home school. Yes, these are kids who have lost, who live in our district, who've lost their homes, they're living in hotels. With these ads that you see on Front Porch Forum, they're real. These are people losing their homes. We have to go pick up the kids and bring them to school, then take them back to the hotel so they can stay with their friends and stay at the school they know.
I don't go on social media. I was out there in California and heard the people that start Google say, get the hell off, don't go. So there are my fellow scientists and engineers. So yeah, I'm probably missing something by not being on it.
One area of this document that we haven't discussed is the town plan should determine the town government staffing and expertise needed to achieve the stated housing objectives. I don't have anything to say other than to point it, we're running low on time. And so before I wrap this up, if anyone wants to address that, now is the time. Or anything else.
Does it make sense? Do you think it should be in here? I mean, the reason we left it in is because it kind of. It kind of makes everything else possible to have. Appropriate resources. Does everybody feel the same way that the town government could benefit from more? More professionalism, more help?
From what I've seen on the planning commission and other areas, the town is already well aware of that, and there's a big push to increase it. So adding our voice is nice, but may not be completely necessary. So do we want to take our opportunity in front of the planning commission and ultimately the select board and be an echo chamber of what people are already saying, or do we want to be narrowly focused on housing? How much bang for the buck can we get? Where do we get the best bang to achieve our goals as a committee?
That actually makes me think it might not be a bad idea to at least leave a sentence of that in there, because if there's already kind of that recognition, then that would be in support of it. And I don't think it's necessarily wrong to add our support to that.
we also have longstanding select board members that haven't done anything about it. They need to hear it from every direction. And the select board had recognized this for the first time in 1968. It was in the minutes then, and the government hasn't changed. And I think if the town does not amp up its ability, if the idea is we're going to do public-private partnerships and government, town involvement in actual housing and working with developers, then we need this. If the town is not going to do that, that really influences the zoning, because then the only tool we have to increase housing is zoning.
Well, one thing is that we're supposed to have that study on where we're gonna put the septic and the water, right?
Mhm.
That's coming
Yep.
soon?
I think it's July, August, it's supposed to be ready.
Okay, because in Richmond and Heinsberg, they increased their affordable housing. They increased their density, but both of them expended something like $400,000 or $500,000 to increase by 150,000 gallons a day, I think, that their treatment plants could cover. And so their zoning regulation says, yeah, you can have density and you get density bonuses, but you're hooking up to our pipes, you're hooking up to our water, you're hooking up to our septic. So if we want to get more density and more housing for people, the thing we need is the water and the septic, because as far as land-based purification, there are limits. I mean, if you get the right soil, you're all set. If you don't, you're stuck.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we need the staff. We don't have the staffing to get that done.
So how is that? So just let me know. I'm asking because I don't know as much as you do on this. So we need construction management. There's a lot of legal work having to do with getting rights of way. There's sort of selection of technology. There's financing. There's bonding. There's a lot of legal work in terms of determining whether these are going to be separate municipal districts or whether they're going to be run by the town. The long-term financing, the projections. Jericho's never done anything like this. The schools have done it, and the schools have those resources. But the town, we don't have a CFO. We don't have a town manager. We don't have people that have managed large projects. And when the planning commission interviewed, for example, the city manager for St. Albans, it was really clear that St. Albans has a town government. I'm not suggesting that we need to match St. Albans, but they have a town government that matches their aspirations. It matches what they're trying to accomplish. And I believe right now, our planning person and our town administrator are, it's not like they're only working half time. They've got full-time jobs, and we need someone who can work with developers. If we're going to have more projects like the one that these fellows are proposing, we're hoping we're going to maybe have 5 or 6 of them over the years.
Building is the model that's probably.
You need, right, but you need in the town, you need someone grant writers, someone who can do the projections for the bonding, who can put together the bond, help find the right investment banks to put together the bond financing for things. There's a real, and Jericho has avoided all this because we run a highway department and a planning commission, and then the rest of the town government is a bunch of contracts. And because we outsource almost everything, Jericho and Underhill are quite unique that way. And, we don't have kind of the muscle memory for doing projects. So if we're going to have in the town plan aspirations for, expanded water and sewer, for, public-private, projects with, housing developers, anything that involves financing, rights of way, the legal work, municipal creation of are the water companies now are basically separate municipalities right now. They're not a function of the town government. Is the additional water, additional sewer going to be run by the town, or are they going to be run by separate municipalities? All that's going to take a whole lot of organizing. And I don't personally right now, when I talk with the select board, I don't think they're really recognizing that. It's like we're going to get we're going to get something back from the engineer who's going to have a couple options. It's going to require more, but in terms of right now, you would think that they would be really sort of gearing up to do a project. And I don't think we have the ability to do that. We have a treasurer who does, I think, is collecting taxes, doing disbursements, following the law, doing the books. That's different from a CFO who can really has the capacity to do, projections and to do major projects. And maybe some of these aren't actual employees of the town, but there's sure going to be competition for finding this kind of expertise with all this ARPA money coming through. And I don't think right now within the town there is the recognition. There's no one really on the select board, I think, who's done big construction projects, or anybody who works for the town. And that's kind of what we're talking about, is big construction projects. It's not going to happen. I still don't think the sewer is ever going to happen, but if it does happen, it'll be that kind of expertise that makes it possible.
Okay,
I see.
so I
Thank you.
think we're gonna close out this topic in just a minute. It sounds like you both have some ideas about next steps in terms of this document. Work on it, send it out. We'll certainly get you feedback. We will be meeting with Linda and Susan, the town planner and chair of the planning commission, later this week to kind of preview what's in this document and talk with them about it, get their feedback and just present the ideas. So that will be happening. And so I'd say maybe do you think a draft after that meeting, once you've had time to kind of incorporate this feedback and touch base with them?
And are we meeting with David White on Monday?
I haven't heard confirmation from him yet. Hopefully we'll meet with him on Monday.
We'll integrate your edits and probably kind of distill kind of a digest at the beginning to kind of summarize our asks.
But I think that none of we all got lost in the weeds because we've been thinking about this a lot and we know a lot about it. I think that the overarching proposals that are in the document are things that we've been consistently talking about, and the Planning Commission and David White have been consistently talking about. So.
Yeah, I'll just tighten it up before we present it on Thursday.
I think I'm glad that we're meeting with Susan, but we're not like a department of the Planning Commission. We're going to produce our independent recommendations to both them and the select board.
I think.
Are you good? Okay. Okay. 8:30. I'm gonna go through this kind of quickly. This is discussing an application for Jericho to be a neighborhood infill design case study. Just give me 1 second.
Is that a neighborhood infill case study?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you tell us more about the geography of what will be studied, how that'll be done?
Nope. So,
Thank you, Michael.
have a good night, Michael.
Thank you, Greg.
The Agency of Commerce and Community Development is initiating a Homes for All project. which consists of a bunch of different pieces, with the hope of reintroducing missing middle homes, yeah, and promoting small scale gentle infill and incremental development. And also there's a large kind of community engagement piece to this as well, to try and get communities involved, on board. They don't say this explicitly, but my thinking of it is trying to really start this YIMBY movement. So one of the things that they are proposing as part of this Homes for All project is doing some neighborhood infill case studies. And so what they mean by that, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the carry it with me everywhere I go, the Enabling Better Places guide and some of these other kinds of toolkits where they go into a town and use it as a case study to explain how to do X, Y, or Z. And so what this would be is some experts coming in and spending half a day, they call them project consultants, I guess, coming into a community, spending a half a day there talking with local stakeholders, planning commission members, ourselves, members of the public, taking a tour of a area that we would want to designate. So I imagine that would be either all 3 village centers or a specific village center. And we can talk about that in the short time that we have. And then put together what they call a visualization, but kind of put together a plan of what infill would look like in that particular village center within the context of that town. So looking at Jericho, we have village centers where even in our village centers, we've got a lot of large lots with houses smack dab in the middle. How do you infill around that in a way that makes sense? Looking at our zoning, all these things to try and put together a picture of what gentle infill looks like for a town like Jericho. And then they'll provide kind of illustrations of what these missing middle homes could look like, what it would look like to infill on this street front, and some of the town specific strategies to advance that kind of infill. And the idea then, the bigger picture then is to use those case studies, and they're looking to do 5 different case studies in different towns and cities across Vermont. Those will then go into part of this larger Homes for All toolkit that will include some missing middle homes design guides, some design guides specifically for builders, some training resources, and just in general materials for towns to be able to implement and encourage infill. And so in order to apply and be selected or considered to be one of these case study neighborhoods, the town has to agree to provide a space to gather for a welcoming event, have a couple of people identified that would lead a tour of the potential infill locations, and then also help get the word out to the community to have folks come and participate in that one half-day session, which I didn't say, but would be taking place in October.
Weekend, weekday?
I didn't put it here. I think the potential days are the 18th, 19th, and 20th. I don't know what those days of the week those are.
Friday.
Does that mean?
You already know that this far in advance?
My birthday's the 16th.
I was thinking some kind of like.
Every year. You know, if this results in another pretty picture that shows where all new little houses and ADUs could go, if everybody did what they were supposed to, we don't need it. We've seen that. We've seen those drawings.
You have asked repeatedly for examples of
Exactly.
what infill could look like and
No.
how it could look
No,
here.
what I've asked for is where it has happened. I want to go see communities before the town relies on infill. We need to go look at communities where infill has happened. Our dominant housing situation in the village and the village centers are houses on 1/2 acre or 1 acre lots with a house in the middle. We need to go see where infill has happened in neighborhoods like that and understand how it happened. We don't need another drawing that shows an ADU could go here, an extra house could go in the back there. We could add a little thing here, we can divide, so, I mean, that's what we need to know, like where it's happened. I mean, right now, where we say we want infill to happen, we have the majority of the houses are single family homes on 1/2 acre lots in a 1 acre zone. That's what we're saying where we want infill to happen. We need to see where it's happened in those
And
situations.
you can ask these consultants that if we get chosen and they come here. But what is one of the 6 proposals that you just put in front of us was to facilitate and encourage infill. And one of the ways to do that is to tell those of us, well, not us, because we don't make decisions and do anything, but the planning commission, the select board, how that can happen here, what that can look like. Maybe they tell us it can't, and then we can take that off the table. And we have to have images of what that looks like for community buy-in so that people can visualize and
Everybody buys
understand
in.
how.
Everybody
it-
buys in. The
Nobody
question,
buys in. I mean,
I think-
okay, I can't say nobody,
I
but
think they
there's a
don't buy in yet,
gazillion reasons why they don't,
Still gotta
because
sell it.
if nobody in town was a NIMBY, then we wouldn't need to be here. I mean, I think
no,
that
the
people
issue is
can't
how do you get someone who owns
picture it.
that
Sure.
house?
Can I interject? Because I think I agree with what Chuck is saying. We need to see this, but missing from all of that is how long does it take? How long will it take if we say, yes, infill here in Jericho, it's a great, they do the study, everything looks great. How long until we get even one homeowner to say, I'm gonna put an ADU in my backyard?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of like, I can't think beyond that. Once I started, like, Chuck was actually trying to make me think about this. I'm like, yeah, I want a walkable village center and I want this densification right here. But when you think about it, it just not happening. Why is it not happening? It's like, a lot more could already be happening. We have, a lot more potential housing that could be developed on 1/4 acre lots that we already have, and it's not happening. Why is it not happening?
One problem is building costs. I'll tell you, we want to have a quality building. I can't believe, if you want to throw up a building that's gonna, it's got a couple centuries of potential. Why not think like that? But these building costs are it's out of control, more beyond your belief.
I don't think that anyone is arguing that infill is going to fix the problem, get us out of the problem. It is one piece of a many-legged stool. I don't know. It's one small piece of the puzzle. It's a piece that if we are going to get free help to help actualize, why not take advantage of it?
Well, because it does take time and energy, and it takes a bunch of Linda's time to organize it, and it takes away from other things. So everything has a cost. But if we can say, as part of the tour, we're in Chittenden County, if you're advancing this as a solution, show us where it's been done, and let's include that in the tour. We can go to Essex, we can go to somewhere, because this is not an unusual problem. I mean, it's like Pinehurst, Sunnyview, Tillotson Drive, the foothills. Show us something like that has had substantial infill within the time constraint of the tour. And it should exist if people are advancing it.
That is not the purpose or the goal of this particular thing. They're not taking us on tour. We are taking them on tour of an area where we would like to see infill, or that we think is an example of infill that could apply to the rest of Jericho. I agree that what you're saying would be useful. John Abbott and Linda have asked have asked the Affordable Housing Committee to apply for this opportunity. I said, yes, we are going to apply for it.
Oh, so it's already done.
So,
So I have actually
Decision made.
in favor of doing this.
Okay.
Which is this set expectations and understand capacity.
Yeah.
So I
so
would
let me
not,
just,
I would not
can you
type,
hold on to it
yeah,
for 1 second? So that is what the program is. That is what the neighborhood case study project is. This is what the ask is of the town. Linda and John have asked the Affordable Housing Committee to do the application, which consists of these 2 questions. One is, what work has Jericho already done to advance housing in your community? And the second is, why do you want to participate in this project? These were my brainstorm thoughts, coming to you all to see what you think our answers to this question, these questions could be. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Frederica.
yeah, and so here's where I see the purpose that could really help us, because I think some of us have doubts about how much infill is really realistically going to happen. And I think if we get beyond the pretty picture stage here, which we have seen, right? We've seen the pictures of infill, so we can imagine that. I think much of the community hasn't seen it, but we've seen it. So, but I think that what would be useful is taking them, especially to an area that doesn't have water and sewer, like Jericho Center and like parts of the corners, instead of down to Riverside. And then saying, okay, what can we actually make happen here? What are our limits? And we may be surprised at what we hear.
I would add to that, what do we want, why do we want to participate in this project? Something that I've harped on before. As one of the oldest towns in the state, we are going to experience a demographic die-off. And someone's going to start buying these houses. We have an opportunity to encourage, when you buy that single family house here in the corners, you put in something else in the back and make more in it. I hate to be fatalistic on it, but looking around the room, I think those of us who are over 60 are close to a majority here.
I'm not over 16.
That's why I'm not in the room.
Be proud.
Well, I think that, yeah, just,
And there's currently no houses for sale on Zillow in Jericho. None, not a one.
What were you gonna say, Stacy?
well, I think I was similarly, just people aren't really thinking about what capacity their property might have for an extra income home or whatever for their family, you know, so
Yeah.
if we're, making it more of a conversation, it might spark some interest in building.
You have to be careful though, with our dreams, like you mentioned foothills. I had a lab test that water coming out of there. It's polluting the Bronze River foothills. And they were warned at the beginning the soils weren't good enough. And, we just, when we do it, and we are gonna do it, but we can't repeat that situation just because we wrong.
That's why it can't just be pretty pictures, but maybe.
Yeah, that's part of capacity,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
just like what-
Is Foothills on community septic, or are they?
No, we're all individual septic, one community well.
Foothills
We
Foothills
should be
has
on
more
community
houses
septic.
than Jericho Center on half the land.
Well, that's
Yeah,
why
Their septic is failing.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's because we were all built at the same time and we're at the end of the lifespan of people's septic system.
What's really behind it.
Mm.
We have water.
Well, Frederica, we have that little stream that runs by our houses, so
Where you-
we have water.
Right, so that was just one thing is I would like to emphasize that as an older town,
Mhm.
we might have lots of opportunities in the next, not 5 years, but in the next 10 or 15 years where either someone like me who says I'm 64 years old, I'm done.
You're gonna move in with me?
I'm not an apartment living.
All right, anything, well, I guess
I like the
before I close this topic out, if you have any ideas about this, certainly let me know. Is there one person who would be willing to look at
Friday, June 23rd, whoa.
yeah, do Friday, June 23rd? Is there anyone who'd be willing to to look at a draft and give me feedback?
How much lead time will I
I
have?
will.
Okay, thank you. I'll send it to you too. You give me what you can.
Yep.
Okay,
When will you have it to him?
I don't know.
If it's Friday, June 23rd at 10 AM and you need it out by 5, that's a little tight.
I do
Understood.
think it's important that the study neighborhood be, I mean, the predominant form of housing in Jericho are these Sunnyview, Pinehurst, Tillotson Drive, it's those types of developments. There's only 61 houses in Jericho Center and a third of them are like that. But
But
and
don't you think the opportunity is in the other places?
that's what I think. So I think the study area should be a place like Tillotson Drive. Or
No, in the other places. I mean, in the places that aren't Tillotson Drive. Because Tillotson Drive is already pretty dense, but. Anyway,
They're already dense.
yeah, Tillotson Drive is dense. Sunnyview is already pretty dense. It's all denser than the area right around.
Right, but
Here.
isn't infill housing that goes next to housing that already exists?
Yeah, but it makes it denser. It makes it, there is housing that already exists like along Route 15 that could be infilled. That's how I see it. Rather
But-
than
but
in the
not-
ones that are already so dense.
And then have septic.
But not that many. I mean, in terms of the preponderance of town. The preponderance of the town are in those places. It's Clover Lane, it's Mountain View. Mountain View would be a place to look at. That's where there's room for infill.
You think so?
There's room up and down Packard Road for infill.
Yes, yeah.
There's room up and down on Lee River Road for Packard for infill.
Things that are already the densest areas and look for infill there. I would go to the areas in the village center that aren't dense.
Less costly to build in there because you don't have to worry about upsetting existing infrastructure.
This-
Orr Road has got all kinds of open fields on it.
Or road, yeah. I
Well,
mean,
if
Orr
we
Road
get selected,
qualifies.
Yeah.
then the town will have to decide, and I think that we should play a big role in deciding what the location is.
Yeah, I would just to state though that while Packard Road and Orr Road are very easy for additional density and infill in there, the goal of this is infill in areas that already appear to be dense.
So like the sunny views in the,
You're right here,
Mountain-
Jericho Corners, Jericho Flats,
Mountain View.
that's not super dense.
this area right here.
Yeah, I mean, this area right here, I
Yeah.
agree with. I don't see this area here as super dense,
It's
but. I mean,
Okay.
when I look at them.
Moving on, it's 8:48. Liaison updates. Okay, anybody?
Planning Commission continues apace at updating the town plan and working with our consultant to make a very short executive page and set and a whole bunch of details in the back,
Um,
and I'll leave it at that.
because I can't help myself, will add on to that June 20th is the local economy working session for the town plan. And then I will just preview that the town plan draft is due to the planning commission on July 14th. And I believe that we'll be able to get our hands on it around that time or shortly after so that we can review it. And then the planning commission will be reviewing it at their July 18th meeting. There will be plenty of time for review and input and feedback, but it's nice to know where the planning commission is at. And we'll discuss it at our August meeting.
Eric, can I just ask a quick question? Eric, what was it that the planning commission was working on to update?
The
The
town
town
plan.
plan,
Town plan, okay, that's what I thought.
and it will be split into, as I said, 2 sections. One, the essence of the town plan, and then the other one, all of the appendix of history and things that haven't changed.
Hope you're gonna take out the Browns getting captured by the Indians as our
Come on, it's
central narrative to.
important town lore.
Richard, any news from the firing range?
I've talked to some people. It's been really hit or miss with everybody. They got a lot of things going on, and I haven't been at the range a whole lot.
Hmm.
Some of the people that I talked to, one I talked to today lives in New Hampshire and drives to the range 3 days a week.
Lives in New Hampshire.
Um, and so there's.
Is it drive a helicopter?
No. He drives a F-150.
Oh my God.
Hopefully an electric one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, I mean, the majority of people that I've spoken to, they just can't afford to live here. The ones that don't live here and then that work there. There are very few that I've run into that actually live in Jericho. So.
Would they if they could?
These are full-time people you're talking?
Yeah, some of the full timers. Some yes, some no. Like the one that lives in New Hampshire said that he doesn't want to live in Vermont. Doesn't like the way that the state is run. He just would rather live in New Hampshire for those reasons.
Sure.
Others are like, you know, if I could, I would like to, however, you know, my family's already in place in the schools that they're in, and I don't necessarily want to pull them out of that school to move them into a new school.
How far afield are they coming from? Are they talking Burlington, Winooski, Williston, or?
Some are coming just from
Eden?
Essex, even,
Okay.
but how far? I mean, they're coming from, Burlington, Virgins area, some of them down that way. So,
Do you think is there a lot of growth coming in employment there?
I think, I mean, right now, the state of the guard is very poor. There's a lot of opportunity
In terms of census?
within the guard.
I mean, in terms of number, there's a lot of vacancies. You mean?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
All right, so. Other business on Thursday, what time is it? 8:51. On Thursday. Planning Commission and Affordable Housing Committee, so Susan and I will be presenting the housing target resolution to the select board.
The one that people haven't really agreed to here yet, but what we've I mean, they've agreed to the principles, but not to the wording.
No, the
The
housing
resolution,
target.
The resolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not, yeah.
No.
So, that's on Thursday. And then. It's 8:52. I haven't been sure about whether to mention this here or not. I intend to go in front of the select board, probably at the July 6th meeting. And ask for them to form a task force to look into building the capacity of town government, whether that be expanding to a 5-member select board, hiring another full-time employee like a town manager, formally identifying contract roles or positions that we need to be able to do some of these big projects that are planned and on the horizon. I intend to do that in my capacity as a resident of Jericho. But it has come to me as a priority because it keeps coming up in our discussions about affordable housing in this room. Our discussions in this committee, it continues to come up in planning commission discussions. It has been mentioned a couple of times at select board meetings and at town meeting kind of in passing. And I have had many kind of one-off conversation with various residents in town. And although all of those conversations are helpful, I think, in terms of identifying that there is a real question about capacity and understanding if there's a need. I don't know how constructive they are in kind of pushing us forward to really understanding what the issues are, what the pros and cons are, what the logistics are of expanding government, and the kind of research and investigating that I've been doing, specifically from Vermont League of Cities and Towns, suggests that the best way to go about doing this is to put together a task force. but that's only something that the select board can do. Maybe they want to do something else, or maybe some other independent body of Jericho residents wants to put together something. But what I had gone to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns with specifically was an ask for a forum, for a community forum where the public could get together and really learn and understand what expanding the capacity of the town of Jericho would look like. What it would mean, what the different options are, how we'd go about doing it, and allow for folks to ask the questions that have come up in one-off conversations, but ask those questions of real experts in town government. And in addition to that, I think the value of having a task force would be then that there would be a group of people who could go out to neighboring towns who have increased to 5-member boards and see how that's going, collect information so that we can have an informed and maybe even objective dialogue in the community about whether or not this is something that we want to pursue and how to go about pursuing it should that happen. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I applaud you for doing that. I think the idea of sort of independent body, thinking about it is good. There was a committee to look at charter changes some years ago, and they worked long and hard on it, and only one of them was really pushed forward by the select board, and that was to change the town treasurer from an elected position to an appointed position. And that really created a ruckus. And I think it's going to be hard for the select board to advance a change on this, because it's a sense of, if only I worked harder, it's always been this way. It's sort of been good enough. It will be controversial. And I think it's something that I think that as you're thinking about how to go ahead, I would make your target town meeting more so than convincing the select board, because it's a hard thing for the select board. It's like asking for a raise, or it's like whatever it is. I think it's going to be a hard thing for the select board to number one, imagine, but also number two, to advance, because it'll be like a self-inflicted controversy.
Yeah.
And when you're kind of in that position, you're trying to kind of avoid controversy a lot of the time, and they're just sort of settled in. But I think there needs to be like this outside sort of pressure, or I don't know what pressure or influence or something like, on the town.
Yeah.
And ultimately it's going to lead to, a charter, probably a charter change. It's going to have to go through the town meeting, and then, the charter change has to go to the state to be approved by the legislature.
Yeah. In addition to the, I'll only speak for one more minute, just because it's 8:58, and I want to acknowledge that this is not something that I'm doing on behalf of the Affordable Housing Committee, and that I will make that clear, but I did want to let you all know that I'm planning to do it for that reason. In addition to Vermont League of Cities and Towns suggesting this route, Wayne Howe has spoken about this publicly, and about not necessarily wanting to move to a 5-member board or hire a town manager, but really wanting to have this conversation. And the fact that he's been willing to do that, and do that on a couple of different stages at different
In his
times.
last term.
In his last term. Makes
Much
me
easier to
think
do in your last
that
term.
I'd rather ask them to take it up and have them say yes, no, or whatever, but be on the record about whether or not to investigate this. And that will signal to other folks in town who have these questions what to do next.
It's worth noting that a 3-person or a 5-person board is, and more people can be good, but a well-managed 3-person board with the appropriate support of
Absolutely.
town managers can be just as effective.
Absolutely.
And we need, from everything we've been saying, we need a real town manager more than we need another 2 people on the board.
I mean, I I'm 100%. Yeah, maybe that's the case. I honestly don't know enough about how town government runs to be able to feel confident in saying one way or the other, which is why I'd like more information, and I think the town needs more information.
Yeah.
Okay, and then our July agenda will be about tabling at the farmer's market. And we may have a guest speaker talking about community involvement and engagement, thinking about how to get folks who are in favor of affordable housing, are interested in promoting more housing choice and diversity, involved and vocal in the community and the town, and getting public buy-in on some of these proposals that we talked about tonight. So we'll see. If there's anything else you'd like added to the July agenda, because it's still kind of hazy in my mind, please let me know. Yeah, Wayne, go ahead.
So over the last few months, I've seen some of the work in our legislature that seems to go against lower and medium income folks. These folks tend to work in retail, so they need a gas powered car. You know, a gas stove would probably be the most cost effective for them. You know, furnace, all this kind of stuff. So I'm just wondering if at some point we want to consider some guidance to our representatives and maybe to the select board that says that as champions of, you know, the moderate income people, we think some of these things that are being done in the name of climate change should be, the impact on the lower income folks should be considered very strongly also. I haven't framed this, but it's the basic idea is, I think that as a board, that this is our bailiwick and our interest, that we might want to provide a moral guidance to some of these folks, that, you know, you can pass these laws, but there's actual real people that are really burdened by some of these things. I'm just throwing that out there as something. Do we want to discuss that in July? And I can put some stuff together on some of the things that have been passed in Montpelier or are being proposed.
Yeah, put some stuff together. I think it sounds
Including like our responsibility for taking care of some number of people coming out of the motels and hotels.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're in the motel or hotel, if somebody has to replace all the stoves or whatever, the heating, all of a sudden somebody has to pay that delta in price, right? If they have to charge more for the rent. So, yeah, I just,
Send me,
yeah.
send me more information about exactly
Okay.
which legislation you're thinking about, and
Okay.
yeah, we can look into at least learning more about it.
Okay,
I think if we could also, if you look at a summary or something of the housing bill that just got passed.
S-100
Yeah,
Yeah,
just got passed.
I don't think
says
it
that you
affects
have to
us
have
much.
You
it
cannot,
affects us much either.
it only if we have water and sewer.
yeah, we don't have sewer, so it doesn't, and we already have duplexes everywhere, so.
Yeah, but no, it would have
But-
said, but with water and sewer, it would have said we have to permit
You know,
multifamily housing.
talking about this development off Morgan Road,
Mhm.
the borders Morgan Road and Brown's Trace, it's 9 luxury homes that I assume are, say, 3 or 4 bedrooms, which is 36 bedrooms with on-site septic.
No, they've got community septic.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, on-site community septic. So that certainly we had the septic there for an apartment building with 18 2-bedroom units. So
Mhm.
the sewer was would not have been an obstacle to building apartments right there, right next to the high school.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Richard.
Second.
Frederica,
anyone?
second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone disagree and want to go longer? It's 9:04. Thank you,
Leave it on, I have to
everybody.
Get to my next meeting. Nice.